When Bruce Lee died at the age of just 32, he was virtually unknown outside Hong Kong. But the films he left behind have made Kung Fu famous. His physical prowess and extraordinary screen charisma overwhelmed the West and made him the world's first Asian superstar.
I have already made up my mind that in the United States, I think something about the Oriental, the true Oriental should be shown.
Hollywood sure as heck hasn't.
You better believe it, man. I mean, it's always that pigtail and bouncing around, chop, you know, with the eye slant and all that.
If you go to any small town in America today, you will see a church, you'll see a beauty parlor, and a karate school. Before Bruce, there was just a church and a beauty parlor.
Americans had stereotypes about what Asians were like, and he took those stereotypes and just turned them upside down on their head.
You know, he's got such an intense desire to be good. He is not a natural athlete in a sense. His small frame, you know, lightweight, but he becomes a superhuman being sheerly by sheer training.
A lot of people ask him, "Are you the best?" And he will always say, "If I tell you I'm the best, you know, you probably think I'm boasting. But if I tell you I'm not, you know I'm lying."
Bruce Lee arrived in America in 1959. He'd been in trouble for gang fighting in Hong Kong, and his parents were worried about his future. They sent him to Seattle to live and work in a friend's Chinese restaurant. Bruce was 18 years old, self-confident and ambitious. He'd spent 5 years training as a martial artist in Hong Kong, and he was already fascinated by Kung Fu's philosophical teachings. In Seattle, he enrolled at the university to study philosophy. He was soon lecturing younger students.
Bruce used to come to my high school in Seattle, Washington, Garfield High School, and he used to lecture about Chinese philosophy in the philosophy class. And although I was not in that class, it seemed that the whole school knew when Bruce Lee came to Garfield High. And so we would often stand at the end of the hall and go, "Ooh, that Bruce Lee guy is here, you know."
Bruce set up a martial arts school in a basement in Seattle's Chinatown. In Hong Kong, Kung Fu was only taught to Chinese, but Bruce welcomed all races and backgrounds.
His speed was fast enough that you literally couldn't see the hands move, and he had a lot of little tricks he developed, gimmicks to demonstrate that. He would ask you to put a coin in the palm of your hand, and he would be standing 5 feet away, and he would say, "Now I'm going to take that coin from your hand, but as soon as you see me move, close your hand."
And the person would close their hand real fast.
He would say, "Now you have that coin?" He'd say, "Yep."
So you think, right, I've beat him, you know.
You'd open it.
And it's a penny.
He had the coin.
This supermarket in Seattle is owned by one of Bruce's closest friends, Taki Kimura. He still holds classes in the gym downstairs where he was taught by Bruce. Taki was twice Bruce's age when he became his student. He had suffered years of racial prejudice. A Japanese American, he had been held in an internment camp during the Second World War. He lived in fear of discrimination. Bruce urged him to take pride in his Asian identity.
He began to talk to me and say, "My God, Kimura, you know, get your hair cut differently. Look at those clothes you're wearing. I mean, they're just, you're just an old man at 36 or 37, whatever I was at that time." But I couldn't help it, you know, but he kept, pumping me up with, things like, you're just as good as me, not any better. You're just as good as anybody else, not any better, not any worse.
In the 1960s, Americans still looked down on the Chinese. They were expected to be subservient. But Bruce had a very different vision of himself and his people.
He had a sense about himself and his worth that he wasn't looking for people who were going to discriminate against him or look down upon him for being Chinese. In fact, I think he would have thought that idea absurd.
In 1963, Linda Emery became a student in Bruce's Kung Fu class. She was 18, He was 23.
And really, I didn't think that Bruce would ever be particularly interested in me. You know, to me, he was the teacher and the showman and the magnet, so to speak. But one day, we happened to be practicing there in that grassy area on the University of Washington campus, and he was showing me a certain throw. And so he threw me down to the ground, and then he said to me, how would you like to go to the Space Needle? And I said, you mean all of us go to the Space Needle? Isn't that rather exotic? And he said, no, just you. And I was like, whew, be still my heart, you know? So I guess that was our first date.
Bruce's reputation as a martial artist was beginning to spread. In 1964, he was invited to California to demonstrate his skills at a major karate tournament.
I actually saw Bruce Lee's demonstration in 1964 at the Long Beach tournament held by Mr. Ed Parker. And I was really impressed with his speed, ability, and the way his personality. I was just fortunate to be there and to see his demonstration. And a lot of people mentioned about the 1964 film. And I said, I was there. I saw that.
The assembled karate masters were astounded by his power and speed. Most of them had never seen Chinese kung fu before and were captivated by Bruce's display, and most of all by a new move he had developed, the 1-inch punch. Taki was Bruce's assistant.
He was able to generate that force that seemed to just come from the tip of his toes right out to the end of his extended hand. He could just hit you just like a high-speed bullet.
I always remember that moment when he did that 1-inch punch. I think a lot of people remember that punch. I mean, everybody is shocked, including all the karate or all the professional people over there. I mean, the power that this guy had. I mean, 1 inch, and the guy, boom, just flew to the chair. So it was very, very impressive. And that moment, and that punch, you know, then I know he's the man. And he will be the man. And will always be the man.
Linda hadn't told her family about her Chinese boyfriend. She had been seeing Bruce for almost a year when they decided to get married.
The plan was that we were going to elope and tell them later. We thought we knew everything, you know. And what we didn't know was that in the state of Washington, when you apply for a marriage license, there's a 3-day waiting period, and then they publish it in the vital statistics of the newspaper. We had no idea. And, you know, those very tiny little printed lines in the paper, whoever reads them anyway, except my maiden auntie, who happened to read it, and it said, Linda C. Emery to marry a Bruce Lee. And, well, so anyway, we were discovered. A big family powwow was held, and they wanted to dissuade us because, you know, it's quite a load to dump on my mother's plate that all of a sudden her 19-year-old daughter is going to run away and marry a Chinese man.
Her mother relented, and Bruce and Linda were married with a ring that they had borrowed for the afternoon. Within 9 months, their son Brandon was born. Bruce decided the time had come to take his wife and son to meet his family in Hong Kong.
It's a very exciting city. It really is. It's going all the time. The city is on all the time. And there's very many, you know, people are hurrying here and there all the time. And it certainly is a different culture than Seattle, Washington, where I grew up, you know. But it was very exciting and very exciting to learn about. And I didn't feel like a fish out of water. The family was very accepting of me. I think it was fairly unusual, both in the United States and in Hong Kong at that time, that we were a mixed couple. His family was quite accepting of it, though. You know, his mother had a small percentage of German heritage already.
Bruce Lee had been born on November 27, 1940, in San Francisco. His father, a Cantonese opera singer and film actor, was on tour in America when his wife gave birth to their third child. The boy was called Saifon, a girl's name to ward off the evil spirits who might steal away a male child. Later renamed Junfan, which means return again, the doctor on duty nicknamed him Bruce. In Hong Kong, Bruce made his first screen appearance at the age of 3 months in one of his father's films. He was already a successful child actor when he met Tony Liu.
好曳啊，成日整蠱我哋啊！即係當我哋僆仔啊！嗰陣時，我媽咪係黎文，佢就同佢爹哋啊，就好成日一日嗰陣時嘅粵語片咧，一日係3部戲啊、4部戲啊、7部戲都有嘅。咁啊，成日都喺片場就喺埋一齊。咁大家都係一個有陣時佢係小朋友演員，我係小朋友演員，大家就跟住媽咪一齊入去玩。咁佢係大哥跟住佢啊，有陣時玩埋一齊啊，做埋一齊啊。但係佢做好多嘢係即係佢都係惡晒㗎啦。咁我哋只不過係跟住佢後邊嘅小流羅靚仔咁樣啦。咁但係嗰陣時我哋已經係好崇拜佢㗎。
I went to same school, Bruce, but he's older than me. He's 7 years older than I am. The school is St. Francis Xavier. And at that time, I haven't met Bruce, but everybody talk about Bruce Lee because he's a big bully. I always see that, he get into fights and he always beat everybody up.
Bruce also had a reputation as a dancer. In 1959, he was crowned Hong Kong's Cha-Cha champion, but his first devotion was to Wing Chun, a style of Kung Fu which he studied under the master Yip Man. Kung Fu was never taught to Westerners. It was a Chinese secret weapon. When fellow students discovered that Bruce had a German grandparent, they refused to train with him. But Master Yip Man gave special training to his most promising pupil. Bruce loved to test his skills in real street fights and soon became known to the police as a troublemaker. So, when Bruce turned 18, his father sent him away to America. By the age of 23, Bruce was married with a young son. He dedicated himself to training. He wanted to prove to the West the power of Chinese Kung Fu.
He was never still. He was always busy, employing himself toward achieving his goals in life. So he was either working out or practicing his martial art, and we always had all the fellas over at our house, his students and friends that would come over and work out at our house. So our house was always busy with people around. We had equipment hanging off the rafters on the patio and in the garage and everywhere you might see. I was often the guinea pig, he would ask me to come over and stand in this pose or that pose or try out some techniques on me.
Bruce knew there was a way to bring Kung Fu to a wider audience. He set his sights on a film career, and in 1965 his chance came. A Hollywood producer had heard about Bruce from his hairdresser, who'd seen one of his demonstrations. Bruce was summoned to a screen test.
Now, Bruce, just look right into the camera lens right here and tell us your name, your age, and where you were born.
My last name is Lee, Bruce Lee. I was born in San Francisco in 1940. I'm 24 right now.
And you worked in motion pictures in Hong Kong?
Yes, since I was around 6 years old.
Show us some Kung Fu movements.
Well, it's hard to show it alone, but I will try to do my best.
All right, maybe when the fellas will walk in.
Yeah, it would be...
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Come on, ladies.
Okay.
There you go.
Although accidents do happen, but, you know, there are various kinds of strikes. It depends on where you hit and what weapon you will be using. To the eyes, you would use fingers. Don't worry. To the eyes, or straight at the face, from the waist, everything on. There is the finger jab, there is the punch, there is the back fist, and then low. Of course, then they use legs, straight at the groin, or come up. Or, if I can back up a little bit, they start back from here, and then come back.
All right.
It kind of works.
He has nothing to worry about. Now,
No.
once again, show us how a good Kung Fu man would very coolly handle it and walk away, rather than get involved in a series of actions.
Cut it. Down.
Okay.
At the age of 26, Bruce landed his first American acting role. The producers of Batman had devised a similar series, The Green Hornet, about a heroic duo. Bruce was to play Britt Reed's sidekick, Kato.
You think Jimmy Key will talk if it means endangering Mary's life?
No.
Obviously, Duke Slade and his Chinese friends don't either.
Okay, we've got Jimmy, they've got Mary. What do we do now?
There's one thing we can't do. We can't turn him over to Scanlon.
You are the new student. Come closer.
You cannot see.
In 1966, Bruce Lee moved his family to Los Angeles to be closer to Hollywood. He opened a new Kung Fu school in Chinatown. Dan Lee is now 76 years old. 30 years ago, he was one of the school's first students.
You think I cannot see.
Of all things, to live in darkness must be the worst.
Fear is the only darkness.
The dedication he has or training is just in awe. I couldn't believe it. It's a day from morning to evening. He was systematically training the arm, the legs, this and that. And I was told that when he make a left punches, how fast his punches are. Well, he did 2,000 punches a day. 2,000 punches. Now I tried one time, 500 punches. My shoulder's worn out already. You know, it was so hard.
Bruce was developing his own unique style of martial arts. He was constantly innovating, studying boxing, fencing, and wrestling to create a more complete fighting system. He called it Jeet, or way of the intercepting fist. Bruce was impatient for perfection. His temper could be explosive.
When Bruce get angry or something, he get into a different mode. And when it's all over, so he came back to his senses again. And Bruce just happened to bought some new 16-ounce boxing gloves. You know? So we just go admiring in the kitchen. You know? And then all of a sudden Bruce says, let's give it a try. Dan, put the gloves on. I said, go, what, me? Put the gloves on? Yeah, put the gloves on. So all of a sudden, put the chairs away, we start sparring, you know? And of course I know this was just a test of gloves, not really for sparring. Then Bruce made a punch toward me, and from my boxing days, I just instinctively slip and counter, you know? It was so fast, I wasn't intending it. It was just my normal boxing, boom, slip, hit. Now he got angry, you know, he's got frustrated. You know? So he started coming all on me. Boom, hitting, punching, you know, and I suddenly realized I'm fighting a monster here. He just keep on chasing me. He's hit me, and I'm moving back off, and hit the kitchen table, and I was ready to put my hands over there, and I was ready to brace myself. Put my hands down, brace myself. Wow! I punched right in my chin. You know? But the next day, I was doing something, and I yawned. When I yawned, suddenly my jaw locked out. Locked out. I started shaking around, and finally found out, oh, that's got came loose. And I went to see a dentist, and the dentist said, Dan, you got a big injury here. There's a little chip of bone chipped off. I said, Bruce Lee gave it to me.
Now, go practice.
Bruce adored his young son Brandon. When he was only 2 years old, Bruce was already teaching him to kick and punch. In April 1969, Linda gave birth to their second child, a daughter, Shannon. Bruce's role in the Green Hornet had given him high hopes for his Hollywood career. He bought a red Porsche and rented a larger house. Celebrities became his students, among them James Coburn and Steve McQueen. Bruce had decided that he would be a bigger star than either of them. But one morning in 1969, Bruce lifted a barbell without warming up. He damaged his sacral nerve, a permanent back injury. Doctors warned him that he might never walk again. But Bruce's self-belief was unshaken.
And despite, anyway, what any of the doctors had said, Bruce never believed that he was never going to do his kung fu again, or walk, or or continue making films. So he always had the faith that he was going to recover from this.
Bruce faced months of painful recuperation. He used the time to develop his theory and philosophy of martial arts.
He really was a self-educated man, and he had collected in his library, probably in excess of 2,500 books on the subjects in which he was interested, which would have been all types of combat, hand-to-hand combat, Western, Eastern, ancient, modern combat, with weapons, without weapons, all types of philosophy, Chinese philosophy, Western philosophy, modern, ancient, psychology, self-motivation, fitness training.
Bruce battled through his back injury, although it was to remain a constant source of pain. Frustrating times lay ahead. Audiences for the Green Hornet were disappointing, and it was cancelled after one series. Bruce was struggling to get even minor parts.
He's always got bit parts. He never gets something really major, because during that time, the whole Hollywood, the thing is that you can't have Oriental, be an Oriental man be a major, be starring role. So he was very frustrated.
And he knew that the Chinese, whenever they were, put into movies in this country, they had the pigtails and they had their hands in their sleeves, and about the only thing they said was chop chop. And he told me, quite often that he was very concerned about the demeaningness of how the Chinese were portrayed.
Bruce had hoped to play the hero of a new TV series called Kung Fu. It had been devised with him in mind, but the producers rejected him for David Carradine, a white actor made up to look Chinese. Bruce was furiously disappointed. But there was one American producer who saw his potential, Fred Weintraub.
Bruce was very smart, you have to understand. And, what Lola wants, Lola gets. Well, what Bruce wants, he eventually got. That's why there was that dynamic part of him. Bruce would use and cajole and be friendly and do whatever was necessary to get moving up a little bit on his own life. And it was great. I mean, people do it. That's what people do. I said, Bruce, the thing I have to have from you is they don't realize how good you're going to be. I need a piece of film.
Fred advised Bruce to go back to Hong Kong, where he'd been approached by the film producer Raymond Chow.
I was so impressed by not just his performance, not his martial art performance, but his personality, the ability to come through the screen and make you feel really his presence.
Raymond offered him a small fee to star in a low-budget action film. Reluctantly, Bruce gave up on Hollywood and took his family to Hong Kong. The Big Boss was filmed in a small village in Thailand. Bruce plays an immigrant Chinese laborer who comes to work in a local ice factory.
你聽住啊，我哋呢度啲嘢比較濕碎嘅，你啊俾心機喺度做，聽朝一早就開工啦嚇。係，掂晒啦，聽朝可以開工噶啦。唔該晒你。誒，唔好講埋啲咁嘅嘢啦，大家都出門揾食啫嘛。嗱，今晚收工之後，我帶你出去玩下啦。
Bruce was a perfectionist. He wanted more control than actors were usually given. He had the first director sacked. Lo Wei, a famous Hong Kong director, took over, but Bruce was still dissatisfied.
咁咧就中間有個咁嘅關係喺度，咁所以佢哋係有好多拗撬嘅時候咧，我都喺中間，我都會幫到啲嘢。但係因為你知老一派嘅導演咧就會係比較咩嘢Bruce 過嚟同我傾偈咁樣噶嘛，即係但係李小龍咧就唔係嘅，收聲。但係李小龍就唔係嘅，李小龍咧就係好即係喺美國翻嚟讀完書嘅，但係佢就會係OK， Director 羅偉 ，come on， 咁叫羅偉過嚟坐低喺度，咁同佢傾偈，佢係一個咁樣嘅人，咁所以就比較即係佢老派嘅導演就唔開心咯，即係你唔 expect 我唔尊重我係大導演啊，你係一個普通嘅演員仔會咁樣，即係佢哋成日都有呢啲拗撬。
The big boss showed Bruce defending his fellow Chinese workers from being exploited and bullied by the Thai bosses. It was to make him a national hero.
真係睇唔出啊！朝安咁打得喎。
嗰陣時喺泰國，我哋一齊食飯，佢叫佢放嗰啲啤酒汽水，佢揸啤酒，揸個汽即係嗰啲汽水嗰啲酒樽，一隻手指咁，一隻手指去撳開汽水。哇 ，he's really fantastic.
The Big Boss broke every local box office record. It played 875 times in Hong Kong and was shown all over Asia. Bruce was an overnight sensation.
You couldn't walk the street with Bruce. I mean, there'd be 10,000 people behind you an hour later, you know. So you walk down the street, it was just amazing. If you went into a restaurant, you came out, there were 1,000 people waiting for him to come out of the restaurant. It's hard to understand the way he captured the imagination.
When he was through with his busy day, he'd come home, and we spent most of the time at home and didn't go out that much because of the difficulty of just maneuvering around. Even, you know, people were well-intentioned, but it was just hard to be out amongst them all the time.
It changed him a lot. It started to change him. Every act I ever managed in my life, when they made it, changed. Some of them handled it better than others.
When he get to that status, I know he become very lonely. I know that. He's a very lonely person. Because it's hard for him to find somebody that understand, you know, what he been through. You know, from nothing, from actually, you know, to have money to pay rent at the end of the month. And then, you know, 2 years' time, reach that level. It's not easy. Of course, you know, Bruce don't really trust a lot of people. He don't really know, it's like, who is really my friend.
Bruce followed the success of The Big Boss with another Hong Kong smash hit, Fist of Fury. Increasingly impatient to make films his own way, Bruce determined that he would direct his next film himself. He went to Rome to make Way of the Dragon. The scene with Chuck Norris in the Coliseum is one of his most famous screen fights.
My favorite is The Way of the Dragon, and that is because it is the most like Bruce was in real life. He has that kind of impish nature in some parts in the film. The kind of comedic sense comes through. The kind of cute guy cutting up, you know, I just really like that. Because that's the way he was in real life often, you know. So, and besides, that was his baby, that film, because he wrote it, he directed it, did the fight choreography, the whole thing.
His third film confirmed his status as Hong Kong's most famous film star. But Bruce was still virtually unknown in America and growing impatient for an opportunity to get back to Hollywood. In 1972, Bruce Lee was working on ideas for a film called Game of Death. He wanted to fight duels in a pagoda with a new, more dangerous opponent on each level. When his friend, the great American basketball star Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, came to Hong Kong, Bruce quickly arranged the fight scene. Kareem is over 7 foot tall. Bruce was 5'7". Bruce was still living in Hong Kong, and in 1972, Fred Weintraub flew over to negotiate with Raymond Chow. They made the deal, which was to make Bruce an American star. Warner Brothers and Golden Harvest agreed to co-produce Enter the Dragon.
Most Hollywood major studios would not entrust the job of producing the film by us or by any outsider for that matter. They would want to send their own people, the whole unit and all that. And we said, no, we can handle it. We've already made many films, including 2.5 of Bruce films. So we know how best to do it, and we can save a lot of money.
Enter the Dragon was the first ever co-production between an American and a Hong Kong company. Fred Weintraub flew from Los Angeles to Hong Kong to produce the film.
The first day shooting was horrible. He came on in a very simple set, and Bruce did not, it wasn't an action film, it was just a simple scene. And Bruce had a slight twitch. And I must say we took 20, 25 takes. And the director came over and said, I said, keep going, just keep going. And about the 25th take, he calmed down, did it, and it came out, you know. But he was scared, he was nervous about it.
When Enter the Dragon was set to be made, you really have to go back and think about what it meant to Bruce at that time. Because here he had spent years in the United States knocking on the doors of the studios, saying, here I am, I can do great things, and the doors had been shut in his face. So Enter the Dragon, being the first American Hong Kong co-production, was going to be Bruce's entry into the United States. So it had to be good, right? It couldn't be a flop. It had to be what Bruce envisioned it as being.
Hundreds of extra stuntmen had to be drafted in from rival Hong Kong street gangs. The result was grudge fights on set, and Bruce was repeatedly challenged by the extras.
A lot of them by that time already heard about Bruce Lee, and one of the things in the martial arts circle has always been, or maybe like boxing, is that, oh, so you are so-and-so. Let's see how good you are. You want to fight?
They stomped their foot and they crossed their arms and they came over and they were supposed to, I want to fight you, you know. And I'd grab Bruce and I'd say, Bruce, you have a picture to do. When the picture's over, you can fight him, you know. He was ready to go and beat the, and he would have.
There were cultural clashes between the American and Chinese crews. They found it hard to communicate and had different ideas about filmmaking.
The key that kept it together was Linda, his wife. Every time it looked like the whole thing was going to fall apart, and I was almost sometimes ready to leave town, Linda would come over and talk to me.
First, of course, she would explain to him in her best that, you know, nobody is trying to do a bad job or sabotage this thing. You know, a lot of things is misunderstanding. You don't have to take this very seriously. And then she would talk to the other people, the other side, and sometimes come to me with a problem.
I don't think it'd be correct to say he sent me along to be his intermediary, but I was kind of involved because the American crew was there and the American producers, so I could talk as easily to them as some of the others, you know, because they had difficulty communicating with some of the Chinese people. So I guess maybe I helped out a little bit in that way, being able to talk to these people and then talk to these people.
And without her, there would have never been an Enter the Dragon. I mean, I would have just left. And without her, there wouldn't have been a Bruce Lee in a funny way, you know. It's amazing how important she was in his life. I mean, and nobody realizes it. You know, it's like one person, Bruce Lee, but it wasn't really. It was Bruce and Linda. And then there was The Rock, that he stood on his pedestal.
Compared to his earlier films, Enter the Dragon was far more American in its structure and style. It was intended to appeal equally to Western and Eastern audiences. Bruce had pushed his body to the limits during filming. Friends noticed that he had lost weight and seemed tense. On the 20th of July 1973, he started to feel ill during a meeting with Raymond Chow. An actress friend gave him a painkiller and he went to sleep in her flat. When later she couldn't wake him, she panicked and called Raymond for help.
We called and we couldn't get any doctor that at first we couldn't get Bruce's own doctor, and then tried to call several doctor friends of mine, and they were not available. Until finally we called a doctor who actually prescribed the medicine to the actress. Dr. Chu came, and actually over the phone, when I described how Bruce was, he said, "You better call an ambulance right away." I rang Linda before the ambulance came and said we better meet at the hospital, at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital.
Linda came immediately, but Bruce was dead on arrival. The press was quick to discover that he had not collapsed at home and speculated that the actress had been his mistress. 5 days later, a funeral was held in Hong Kong. Police had to control the crowds of up to 30,000 mourners who filled the streets.
I was very upset. I mean, just, I wasn't, the truth is, I was passed out in the back. I was just devastating. I was thinking to take care of Linda, but end up Linda taking care of me. You know, I was very embarrassed. She's a very strong woman.
I determined that I would bring Bruce's body back to Seattle because Bruce often said during the time of our marriage that one of the happiest periods of his life had been when he lived in Seattle. And we had another private, smaller funeral. It was just a gathering of family and friends.
Bruce Lee was only 32 when he died. The cause of death was unclear. Amid rampant speculation that he had been murdered, the Hong Kong authorities called an inquiry. Linda appealed for privacy.
It is my wish that the newspapers and the people of Hong Kong will stop speculating on the circumstances surrounding my husband's death. Although we do not have the final autopsy report, I hold no suspicion of anything other than natural death.
The inquest concluded that Bruce had died of a brain edema in reaction to the painkiller he had taken. And despite the verdict of death by misadventure, wild rumors about Bruce's death have continued to this day.
I know it's not satisfying, but you know, it's really not important either, because the fact is that Bruce is gone. And I have had to learn to live with this. And the really important part is when Bruce was alive and the life he lived, not why he died or how he died. We don't always have answers to all our questions. So.
1 month after Bruce's death, Enter the Dragon was released in America. It was to become a cult classic and has taken over $200 million. Linda attended the premiere on Sunset Boulevard with Fred Weintraub.
The saddest part was Bruce wasn't there to see it. That's what the thing. I was with Linda that night and with Ted Ashley, the CEO. And it was sad to see the audience react so strongly and Bruce not to see it, an American audience. He would have just loved that. It would have been wonderful.
It was devastating to Brandon when his dad died. I mean, I just can't even describe to you how an 8-year-old boy losing his father, especially a father who was much bigger than most fathers, right, at that age. And so Brandon had a lot of internal difficulties dealing with that.
After Bruce's death, Linda took Brandon and Shannon away from Hong Kong and started a new life in America.
Brandon and I were just 2 kids, just like all the other kids in school. We didn't go around telling people, oh, my father's Bruce Lee, you know, aren't I cool? Because to us, we wanted acceptance on our own terms.
Brandon grew up determined to become an actor, but Bruce Lee's son was only offered martial arts films.
He knew intellectually that it had been a blessing to have the dad that he had, and it was also a burden to have to be under that shadow all the time and live up to people's expectations, not be able to live his own life.
In 1992, Brandon was at last offered a major acting role, the lead in The Crow. He never saw the finished film. In a freak accident, he was killed on set by a faulty blanks gun.
You really say I shouldn't be in a cemetery in the middle of the night, right?
Safest place in the world to be.
It's because everybody's dead. I knew you'd come here.
It's really late, Sarah.
You didn't say goodbye.
It was difficult to go see it, and I didn't know if I wanted to go see it. But then I knew from having talked to Brandon when he was on the set how proud he was of this movie and how excited he was about doing this movie, and I thought that I had to go see it. And so I think in a way that was sort of the, even though it was several months later, the closing of a lot of events going and seeing the film and being so impressed with him and his work. He's buried next to my father, which was actually a plot that was owned by my mom, but in light of the events, it seemed the natural place for him to rest, finally.
Their graves are visited by people from all over the world. Bruce's films are still cult viewing. New audiences continue to fall under his spell, to be captivated and inspired. He remains the biggest Asian superstar the West has ever known.
Well, Kung Fu can be practiced alone or with a partner. Practicing alone, they involve form. Some imitate a crane, a monkey, a praying man. This is a crane form. Start off. This is one of the movement involved.
He's just like a beautiful meteorite, just blown up and stirred the whole world and then faded away, you know. And I was feeling like, had Bruce lived, you know, longer, probably there'll be even more contribution. Then I step back and say, you know what happened? Some people can live, you know, their whole lifetime, nothing happened. But Bruce, in a short few years, he's already contributed so much.
You never can understand it. The Bruce Lee syndrome just keeps coming back every 10 years, it's just amazing. Like a James Dean, that kind of Elvis Presley, Bruce Lee,
Nobody knew when my father died that he was going to be this huge international sensation. Enter the Dragon had not been released yet, and so it's been an adjustment period over these many years, a constant adjustment period of learning to deal with this phenomena that has happened.
People from all over the world, not just America and the Far East, but all over the world, think of Bruce as their hero, and not because he's Chinese or because he was American or his nationality or racial origin or any of that, but because of the person he was and what he achieved.
Definitely there's something we can learn from each other, East and the West. And that's how Bruce put it together, East and the West. Something good from the East, something good from the West, and you put it together.
You still think of yourself Chinese, or do you ever think of yourself as North American?
You know what I want to think of myself? As a human being. Because, I don't want to sound like, as Confucius say, but under the sky, under the heaven, man, there is but one family. It just so happened, man, that people are different.
Okay, we got to go. Thank you, Bruce Lee, for coming here.
Thank you
for
Pierre.
watching.
Continuing our Bruce Lee weekend next, Brandon Lee stars in The Crow, followed at 11:55 by an episode of the 60s cult TV series, The Green Hornet.
Kids drink from the box, the juice kids, surf life kids, surf the box, drink, yeah, Bruce Lee.